In the more recent videos, I've focused on how to create and edit SVGs more efficiently. Now when it comes to efficiency, there's not just the aspect of your time and of making it easier for you, but there's also the aspect of the way the code actually loads, right? So I've been using this house graphic more recently, and it was created fairly quickly in Illustrator and then tweaked just a little bit in brackets. The next tool that I want to show is SVGO. So SVGO is SVG Optimizer. The way that Illustrator kicks out its vector graphics, the SVG graphics, even though they're more efficient probably than creating that same graphic in a pixel-based or raster-based format, they could still be better. SVGO is a tool that you can use in the command line to optimize the SVG code. However, it does require a little bit of installation. You can do pretty much the same thing with SVG OMG, which stands for SVGO's Missing GUI. This is what it looks like. Now this is the address up here, but you can also just Google it and it will pop right up without any trouble. So we can do two things with this. We could go into my SVG file and copy and paste the code into here, but we can also tell it to open and actually load the file itself. So here's my SVG. Here is a preview of it, and I have all of these little features over here. Now right now its instant prediction is that it can cut this down to 2.58 kilobytes, saving about 43% or 44%. If I do get info, we can see that the current version is 14 KB. So actually, that's quite a bit more. So the math here somewhere is a little wonky. But anyway, the point being, it has some cool features, and we'll play with it a little bit and then export and then look at how much it actually saved. So there's all of these different options on here, and you can turn them on or off. Some of them you might want, some of them you might not. And as you click on them, you can see how they might affect the actual size. So you can see that prediction changing live as I click on things. Now which of these you remove is sort of up to you. I'm going to remove most of them, but I'm going to leave the view box on. And is there anything else that I want to leave on? Most of these seem okay. Prefer view box to width height. I'll go ahead and take that off. I'll go ahead and take off merge paths. Most of these look alright. Now we can also see the precision here. So we could have it up higher, and here it's only saving 12.65%. We can drop it down, and now it's saving quite a bit more. Now if you look at the actual SVG here, I don't see any noticeable difference. So that's great. There's not really much change. Depending on what you've created, that may or may not be the case. So, you know, it's worth looking at the image and seeing how much it affects it or not. And you can also tell it to show original. So here to here, a little bit of change, super precise. So there is a slight change, but it's not really that big of a deal in this situation. Now we're also going to turn off gzipped, and that does take quite a hit to the size, but this is essentially a zipped SVG, and that could cause some problems depending on what we want to load it with. Now there's also multi-pass, and that saved a bit, but it's typically recommended to leave that off as well. And actually, if you look at the preview, you can see it does affect my graphic quite a bit. The strokes on the hills get a little weird. Now, some people do recommend turning Pretify code off, and you can see it does save a bit, but it kind of depends on what you want to do. If your image is absolutely done and you're making no further changes to it, sure, turn Pretify code off. But if we look at the code itself, and this is cool too because this actively changes as you turn things on and off, so that's cool. What Pretify code does is it actually creates useful white space for you to edit with. So if I turn it on, now we have this nice white space here, which makes it very easy to know what goes into what. And for me, I really like that. I like being able to look at the code and see what's going on and being able to edit it. The size does take a slight hit, but it also depends on sort of what you're doing. Like, if you're making the Google Doodle as an SVG file and you're going to have it viewed by millions of people multiple times a day, yeah, that might be kind of a significant thing. But if you're just creating like a personal website or a piece of art for yourself or a small scale website, having the ability to edit it quickly and easily might be more important to you. So that's sort of a decision for you to make based on your needs. I'm going to leave Pretify code on because I want to go in here after this and actually modify the code a little bit to create some animation and some interactivity. So being able to edit it easier is more important for me right now than the slightly increased file size. Now we also have these clean IDs here. And what does that actually do? So if we go up here, we have like ID A and ID B and some of these. If I turn that off, well, not that big of a deal. You can see it just made the IDs smaller. It still has IDs, but they are smaller. Now somewhere in here I should have, there we go, like shadows. So I did create some IDs myself. And if I turn that on, what does it do to them? So we have right here 9.4.519.3.7z, right? So if I turn this on, that jumps up a little bit, but it's still right here. So my ID is gone. I had it here in this group ID shadows, and it just decided to get rid of that altogether. That might be important to you. It might not be important to you. It depends on what you want to do. I'm going to leave clean IDs off because I'm probably going to use some of them when I'm doing a little bit of animating and interactivity. Now some of these IDs are like lame. Like some of these it could cut them down to save a little bit of space, but I could also cut them out myself, or I could just not worry about it because if you look at the space it saves, it's not that much. I mean, it's a bit, but not that big of a deal. So I can now download this and I'm just going to save it, and there it is. So if I do get info for this one, and I compare it to get info for this one, there is some savings there. I could have optimized some of the other things in there too to make it even smaller, but that just doesn't fit my general purpose right now. So if I open both of these in text edit, so you can see that both Illustrator and SVG OMG do a pretty good job of rendering the whitespace in a readable way. But depending on where you got the SVG, if you didn't create it in Illustrator, or if you got it from somewhere else or from some other program that maybe doesn't do as good of a job, this can be a pretty useful way of creating that whitespace that you might want when you're doing further editing. And if not, then cool. Just get rid of the whitespace to make it a little bit more efficient for transferring. Now this isn't the only tool. There are a few others out there. So there's the SVG Now plugin that you can actually add directly into Illustrator, assuming that you have the right version, which is essentially putting SVGO directly into Illustrator. And you can sort of see what it looks like a little bit down here. If you're using Inkscape, there's a similar version for that as well, with a not too bad installation process. There's also a Sketch plugin as well that does essentially the same thing. If you use Grunt, there's a version for that as well. And there's also one for Gulp. Now those all require a little bit of installation, but there's a few other web tools you can use as well, like SVG Minify. So if we grab my original house again and we try it on here, we can see how that looks. So it reduced it down a little bit, not as good as SVG OMG. And there's some other tools out there too that we will discuss in future videos, as they're a little bit different in what they do.